The old man was stunned, thinking, whose show is this? They actually took a swing at me. On the other side, his voicemail went unheard by Doug, a classic lonely bachelor living alone, so he shouldn't have missed the message. But when he checked his phone like always, he only heard mundane things. Doug had recently become very fond of amnesia and often forgot way, but he didn't care much until he found 2 drops of deep red liquid on the counter with a bloodstained shirt beside. Bad luck. His condition seemed even more dramatic than he imagined, and just then the phone chimed with a final voicemail from the detective, urging Doug to hurry up and come. To claim the billionaire old man's body, he willed all his treasures to Doug. For the cash. The detective called Doug because he was the old man's only heir, but deep down he suspected Doug was involved in the old man's demise. Less than 12 hours after his death, Jenny, his daughter, popped in from France. The detective raised an eyebrow. Since the old man had a daughter, how could he leave all that cash to Doug? The detective smelled something fishy. The detective asked Doug about last night's contact. Oblivious Doug said no, despite call records. At 11:02 last night, Doug felt a jolt of panic and hurried home to comb through his messages. Finally, he found the old man's message, but it cut off mid-sentence. The old man didn't specify who to give the letter to, but Doug just needed to visit the old man's former friends and catch up on their recent developments. The old man's account had all the info logged faithfully, but his other assistant, Wooly, disagreed with this plan. The machine was still in testing. A long connection might discomfort you, but Doug had a compelling reason to use it. Every clue pointed to Doug, and both the police and Doug himself thought he might be in hot water. He couldn't recall last night's events. He didn't know if he killed the old man or if someone was framing him, but clearly, the old man knew something. He decided to dive into the virtual world to find out. He told Wooly to set the connection time to 2 hours, even though that was pretty much overkill. Characters in the virtual world are often doppelgangers of folks in real life, so Doug was quickly matched up. Through the consciousness channel, Doug suddenly morphed into a bank teller. It was all so real. People were stunned by his own dad expression. Customers thought he was pulling a stunt, like missing their cue. The manager, seeing him in such a state, worried he was ill and opted for a break. Poor Doug. What left Doug chuckling was how real everything felt, except the colours were a bit off. This place was like an actual world. Doug marvelled at the wonders of technology and quickly hailed a taxi. He aimed to meet the old man's vessel. As a bookstore owner, surely he would help without thinking twice. But no matter how Doug hinted, the owner showed no intention of handing over the package and instead thought Doug looked oddly familiar. This was clearly the side effect of possession. The owner's memory came from the old man. With no letter in hand, pumped up Doug moved to his next target, a beautiful girl. She was the old man's most contacted person, but she wasn't at home. She was at the hotel, flexing her martial arts. When Doug found her, she was being shooed out by the manager, showing even in the virtual world, the class divide was crystal clear. The girl thought Doug was a new customer and, following the rules, sent him to the bartender to get acquainted. The bartender took the old man's letter, but Doug's hint fell flat. The 2-hour mark was nearing, and poor Doug felt intense discomfort. Between his real and virtual bodies hanging by a thread, he had to hastily wrap up this meeting and dash to the bathroom to recover. This trip felt like a bust, but Doug thought it was worth it, even stumbling onto another side of the elderly man's life. Just as Doug left, the bewildered bank clerk finally came to, and the bartender also confirmed that he was nothing like the Doug. Just realizing something was off, his face darkened, and back in reality, Doug ran into a thug. The adversary aggressively demanded a substantial protection fee. Upon witnessing Doug's utterly confused expression, he swiftly unleashed a punch towards him. However, to everyone's astonishment, Doug managed to fight back. After a few hits, the thug fled, saying, "He'll find you in America's most dangerous spots." Doug stared at his hands, shocked. The thug's words filled Doug with dread. He was lost in the fog of confusion, desperate to figure out what was going on. He decided to seek out Jenny. If she was truly the old man's daughter, maybe she'd have insights. Jenny warned Doug, "Don't enter the virtual world again. You can't connect your head and stay unaffected. I came back to shut down Father's hospital system." The truth left Doug speechless. Jenny believed Doug's issues stemmed from the machine, but the virtual world was the old man's culminating effort. How could he not know? Oddly enough, Jenny never blamed him despite Doug inheriting everything. When they first met, Jenny also gave Doug a sense of deep decorance and Seinfu. Doug could no longer hold back and voiced his curiosity, and Jenny's intentions were crystal clear. She invited Doug to dance. Everyone was game, but suddenly he lost all memory. It wasn't until the cops barged in that Doug snapped back to reality. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, or you may never see Doug again.